Hi, I'm MJ, and welcome to the third devlog for our game Maskborne. Now, we've had to take the past 3 or 4 weeks off just because of work, but we're back on track now. I actually wanted to make this devlog a lot earlier, but life happens. So this devlog is going to be a little bit different compared to the first two. There's going to be a lot more theory up front with some stuff that we were working on, all the stuff that you don't necessarily see or feel in the game, but it's still important to play out in your mind and figure out exactly what stuff needs to be. And later in the devlog, we'll look at some explosions and some foliage doing crazy stuff when you touch it, and some new art, and also a little bit about music. So let's dig right into it. In a lot of games, upgrades, skills, or abilities are things that just tend to manifest themselves. You kill some bad guys, you get some XP. You store that XP number in your body somewhere, click a button, and now you got a fire spell, or you up your strength. It's a proven system. A lot of games use this for good reason, but for me there's always been a bit of a disconnect with that way of gaining strength or upgrading your character. Enter Breath of the Wild. No imaginary stats. You've got potions and meals that you've cooked. You eat those and they give you a buff. Or through exploration, right, you might find some armor that you then later in the game take to a fairy, a great fairy, throw in some hard-earned cash and some monster parts, and she will upgrade it for you. Whether it's a fairy or an armor or something, there's a tangible element to that I feel like is very easy to relate to. It's still farming, you're just not farming for XP, you're farming for parts and equipment to upgrade that part of yourself. This was a major inspiration for what we initially dubbed the cooking system for Maskborne. I think of it as an equipable skill tree in a way, not the traditional RPG skill tree with a bunch of nodes that branch out and infinite variety. There's something about it all being driven by the world, the exploration in the world, the creatures, the foliage, the fauna, all that stuff in the world that I really like. That inspiration from Breath of the Wild is very dominant in the system that we're trying to develop. We've gone through a lot of iterations of this over the past, 2 months or so. And it initially started as this cooking mechanism, just like you have in Breath of the Wild, right? One of the big reasons is we wanted resting to sort of matter, not just a, die, rest, repeat, and then all over again, but actually give you something to do at the fire. We were thinking about making a fire, right? So you have a fire like a bonfire, like in Dark Souls. That's where you do your resting. Nothing revolutionary there. But you can take a break from combat, slow down, and, with cooking, I feel like that naturally facilitated that. Take a little bit of a break and try to experiment with all of the ingredients that you've collected throughout, your latest playthrough. And this first version of the cooking system was sort of like a pure Breath of the Wild inspired mechanism. You can take anything and everything in the world and you combine the ingredients and you see what you get. You consume that or equip it and you have that with you until you die. The problem with that, especially for this kind of action platformer, Metroidvania type of style game, is that you die a lot. I mean, you die a lot more than you do in something like Breath of the Wild, right? And so it very quickly turned into just a farming simulator if you wanted to get those buffs back. And I didn't really like that because the less skillful players would be punished for dying more often compared to the skillful players who would they would retain their buffs and they could just, keep on going. And one of the big issues for me there is that it turned into more of a chore and lost the magic of exploration, right? So instead of, actually, I really want to get this buff back. Oh, okay, now I have to go out and I need to farm for these specific creatures to get these specific ingredients so I can make my dish again. So we thought, okay, how do we solve this impermanent system where you lose access to your buffs? Well, the most obvious answer is, well, you just make it permanent, right? So once you've unlocked something, you have it forever and you don't need to go out and farm it again. A bit of the magic gets lost because now there's no incentive to explore anymore, right? You have the dishes. Once you're done with that, all right, you got it. Just play the game. But that was That may be a little bit sad because exploration was part of the thing that I really liked in Breath of the Wild. Discovering a new ingredient, discovering a new combination of ingredients, what would they actually make? And with the permanent system, just the permanent system, I feel like some of that got lost. So we stepped back a little bit and started thinking of it as equipables instead of dishes. And we split it into two categories: permanent and impermanent ones. Right. The permanent ones are dishes you would unlock through recipes. Recipes you find in the world for exploration, maybe locked behind a optional boss or something you can buy from an NPC. Right, that gives you the recipe for the exact 3 ingredients that you need to combine in order to get the equipment. And on the other hand, we would have the impermanent ones. These are just for your experimentation. So right now we're thinking about 90 ingredients in the game, all from creatures, and it could be like tentacles or blobby stuff. It could be leaves, it could be twigs, whatever, right? Combine that and combine them in any order and see what you get. That would be your impermanent stuff. That's stuff that you can just experiment with, things you might have in your inventory that you just kind of want to see, what does this turn into? And you add that as your loadout for, your next run, basically. For now, I think that's the best of both worlds because it gives players the ability to just have fun, to take some of the stuff that they found in the world and see what happens, right? Sit down by the fire, throw it into the fire, and, well, I guess you don't throw it into the fire, but we'll get to that in a little bit. By the fire, you combine it and you get something in return. Now, I don't want to, gate the permanent stuff behind necessarily something you need to unlock first. So if you know the recipe for a permanent upgrade or a permanent equipable, you can just make that, whether it be from a previous run or maybe you looked it up on a wiki or something like that. If that's what you want to do, you can totally do that as well. And the final bit of the system is sort of like where we are now. There was still one thing that was kind of nagging at me, and that was the fact that we were referring to this as dishes, right? You can't equip dishes. It doesn't make any sense, right? You eat them. The system made sense when we ate dishes, not now. So what we did, brainstorm a bit, and we came up with the term boundlings, something more alive, right? In the game, we have our stamina / soul meter right now, and we're kind of thinking we take those 3 ingredients, and if it's the right 3 ingredients, you combine them, and you get to throw in a little bit of soul energy to animate them, right? You create a boundling. Now the boundling, a tiny creature that stays with you, that you can equip as you go out on your journey, and through that, it'll sort of bestow something on you. I've had this idea of something related to chows from Sonic Adventure 2, the old game. I played it on GameCube, and that whole system of you have an egg and you breed the 2 and then they make a new chow or something like that. That was always very interesting. Not that we would have a breeding mechanic or anything like that, but just the idea of a living companion that would join you and bestow power on you. I'm a big fan of that idea, especially compared to the whole, dishes route that we went down for a while. Now for some actual visual work and not just, the brainstorming. The first thing that we worked on were ingredients, right? We established the system and we wanted pickups or ingredients in the world that we could play around with. Luckily, I'd already made this coin drop mechanic and a body part mechanic that we could use to create the ingredient system from. So I just took that code, rejigged it a little bit, and now enemies can spawn ingredients. It's editable. In Godot, we can choose which ingredients, how many of each ingredient they drop, what the drop chance is, all of that. It's using the basic Godot system with arrays and everything, so it's a little bit clunky. I might do something more custom for that in the future if we find that we need it, but for now it kind of works. Now this sort of ties into a mentality that I've been trying to get into since the last devlog, because I kept hearing about it from others and there was some feedback that I kept getting, and it's the whole concept of something that I'm calling ugly prototyping. I don't know if that's the term, but that's what I'm going with. So try to get stuff done really fast so it's just functional, and then polish it up later. Because for the first 3 or 4 months of this project, basically everything that we did was really polished. And I feel like we needed to do that to prove to ourselves that we could make the game that we wanted to make, both functionally and visually. And I think we're past that. Like, we like the direction we're headed, and we can see that we can achieve the visual style and the feeling of the game that we want. But now we need to speed up development, right? And in order to do that, I need to get a little more sloppy with what I do. Not sloppy in terms of code or anything, but just in terms of developing the feature, not having to like 100% it in the first go. And because it does lead to some unfortunate downsides, which is if you ever need to adjust stuff, right? Maybe you have a lot of polished work that you spend a month on, and maybe it doesn't work. And now that's wasted time. So I'm trying to get better at that, to push through, to just make features really fast and then, make them better later. Now, one of the bigger challenges was the UI. We have by no means solved the UI here, but we're trying. It's like figuring out everything that needs to live in the UI, how that all connects together. I think this is one of my big demons when it comes to game dev right now. It's these systems like this that connect to each other, and data needs to be shared, it needs to be stored, all of that. It's still like, it's magic to me, but eventually we'll get there. So we created some prototypes for UI, looking at, I think Tears of the Kingdom was a good inspiration, and Black Myth Wukong, I think we looked at as well. Maybe some others. But basically, just looking at some other games, seeing how they solved the UI problem. And with what we wanted to do for ingredients and a combination system and all of that, there's a lot of work already, actually. And I still feel like we have a lot longer to go before we solve the UI. It'll probably be like an evolving, constant thing throughout the game. But right now, we have a framework for it. Ingredients go into the UI. You can select them. You can read the descriptions of them. You can't really do anything more. Like we don't have the combination system or anything like that yet. But it's there, we can store it, and we can preview it, which is a start. Now, let's return back to something that I mentioned earlier, the bonfire. The classic Souls bonfire where you sit down, you rest, you upgrade. Maybe there's an NPC around and you have a conversation. It's a place for you to contemplate on your latest failure in the game, how you died, and how to readjust your strategy next time. One quick thing I really wanted to touch on with that is, again, related to the UI. So this was like the one additional thing I did with the UI was make it conditional. So when you sit down by the fire and open up your inventory, you get this special binding screen where you can combine your ingredients to create boundlings. Again, the system doesn't exist yet, but that's the idea. One adjustment or one tweak to the bonfire that we really wanted to make was that we wanted to bring it to life. We didn't just want it to be an actual fire, we wanted it to be a character. The first thought that goes through people's head, I'm sure, is Calcifer from Howl's Moving Castle, which I think is really well done. That dynamic between Howl and Calcifer, great, S tier. But obviously we can't just make Calcifer. That's a solved thing. So we need to make our own thing, right? For now, we're calling our little bonfire Soot. And so there's a lot of backstory written about Soot and a lot of lore already. And this is the tricky thing. Like, I really want to dig into it, but I also don't want to talk about it too much. Everything in the world that we're building for Maskborne, I want it to feel rich and I want it to feel lived in. Like, it shouldn't just be a thing that's there. Like, there's a reason Soot is there, and throughout playing the game, you will learn more about Soot, where he came from, why he's in our world, all that stuff. But for now, he's a bonfire that you can craft stuff at. And in the future, we'll introduce some dialogue and you can have some dialogue with him as well. Now on to the explosions that I promised. So, the explosions are death related right now. And so when an enemy dies, right, there wasn't really anything, right? The enemy just kind of either flew around or vanished. So we started creating a simple death effect. It was just some particles that would spawn when the enemy died. And that's great. There's some feedback to you killing this poor creature in the game, right? Splat. But I feel like it lacked some more oomph, And so we looked around, looked at a bunch of games, And I can't remember. I think it might have been Ori. That had like a shockwave kind of effect that I really liked. So I tried implementing that, where we're sort of deforming the screen that you look at, right? So you hit the creature, it explodes, shockwave, bam. Looks really cool. I'm making it sound a lot easier than it actually was because this took a really long time, and it was really hard for me to wrap my head around the whole explosion and deformation of the screen. So essentially what we're doing, like in really simple terms, I guess, it's like we have a sheet of plastic, let's call that, across the whole screen. And so we just deform that one layer, right? We don't deform the creatures or anything. There's just like this one deformation screen over the entire thing, and we deform that, we spawn them on that, and then, you know, because then it's like ripples in water, right? Like one drop here, and when they meet, they actually sort of interact with each other, which I think works really well. We took that and then we sort of expanded on it further and created this halo effect as well. Again, maybe that was from Ori? No, I think that was from somewhere else. I can't actually remember. But I saw this halo effect coming out of explosions, right? Like this leading edge, like this visual leading edge, which I thought was really cool because the shockwave alone, like the deformation, is cool. It gives you this, there's some effect to my hit, but it's not something that you hopefully notice that much. It's more of like a feeling, right? Now with an enemy like Plum, the little green floating guy, he's a little bit devious, right? When he dies, he has like this death transition. So you give him the final hit, and after that final hit, he doesn't actually die right away. He like has like this kamikaze attack where he starts to track you, and when after, I don't know, a second or second and a half, he actually explodes with a hitbox that can damage the player. But the cool thing about both the shockwave and the halo is that there's like standalone components, so we can use it for everything. And so again, going back to Plum, he has projectile attacks. And so when the projectile attacks, they hit the ground or they hit the player, they also explode. And I like the idea of explosions sort of living in the same universe, right? So these explosions, they have a shockwave and they have a halo. And all of that customizable for just the look that we need. I'm very happy with this system now. It took a lot of work, a lot more work than I thought it was going to take. Now, on to probably the coolest thing that I've made so far. I think this is the thing that I'm like, the tech that I'm the most proud of so far in the game. It's just really cool. And this one is 100% inspired by Ori, right? I saw a video from another developer, Soulflame. Or maybe the game is Soulflame, or he is Soulflame, I don't know. Soulflame was the inspiration initially there because he had these sign distance fields where you would do stuff to the tree, like you would jump into the tree as the character and that would deform the canopy. And I had looked at Ori before, and we had talked about it as well, like the deformation you have in Ori, and sort of discarded it because I seem to remember that it was all rigged because Ori is 3D and maybe it's 2D elements or something, I don't know. But I kind of discarded the idea because I thought that was way too advanced and way outside the scope of what we wanted to create, basically. But saw the Soulflame video, and I think that kind of lit a fire in me because I was like, okay, then that must be possible with math. And so with a little bit of shader magic and a little bit of GD script, a lot of GD script, we finally made it work. It's super cool. It reacts to the player, like the player runs through grass, it bends, it deforms, it does a lot of really cool stuff. So let me just show you a few of the things that we do with the system and sort of how it all started. Right, to begin with, we just took the sprites that we had and we just deformed them based on player velocity. So the faster the player goes, the more like stretches, essentially it stretches. Because when you're working with a sprite, you only have 4 vertices, 1 in each corner that you can deform, like you can stretch them. Then I needed to figure out, okay, how do we actually make this deform? And after a lot of reading and a lot of trial and error, I figured out that at runtime we could sort of convert it to a mesh, like an actual mesh, a mesh that we can subdivide. And by subdividing it, right, we cut it into more pieces internally, and we can deform those pieces again based on player velocity. So what we did is based on the height of the asset, we deform it more or less. So at the very top, full deformation. At the bottom, 0 deformation. if you didn't have zero deformation at the bottom, it would like move like with the top as well. So now it like flops around and it works surprisingly well, actually. Yeah, I was kind of surprised by this. Now, Emilie had this great idea of adding wobble to it. So like the secondary motion, as you run past it, it would be pushed in front of you because of like the wind pushing, and then it would sort of return to its original position, overshoot that, and then slowly settle. Something that we didn't have in the beginning, and it felt quite stiff. It looked cool, but it was quite stiff. But I think this additional wobble just made it a lot more organic. And so we just kept iterating on this, adding tiny movements and tiny tweaks to everything. And now we have a fully fledged system, again customizable. You basically just take a parent node, add it to a special group, and add the GD script to it. And then in that GD script, we can control everything. How it deforms, how stiff it is, how quickly it returns to its original position, all of that. And the cool thing is, by just keeping it in nodes like this, we can make groups of things. So let's say you had one type of grass. You put all that grass into one node with the same settings. And then maybe you have like these long stalks of something. It could be really stiff material that you still want a little bit of deformation in. You put that in a different node with slightly different settings. And you can stack these as much as you want. Want something new? Just spin up a new parent node and put your assets in there. So a really cool system, I think, adds a lot of life to the world already. And I think we can use this as we go further to do other things as well with deformation, because basically now we have the system, right? We already did that actually really quickly. We took the system and then we combined that with the shockwave explosion halo effect from the enemies. So when you hit an enemy now, like with as a player attack, right? You hit the enemy, that spawns a shockwave and halo. And when Plum launches a projectile at you and it explodes on the ground, that has that same effect. So we hooked that up globally. So now any effect that uses the halo and the shockwave will deform these environment reacts, as I'm calling them. And we don't really have to do much more work. So we just plop that in and the system works. Now I quickly just want to touch on the art style and the new assets that Emilie has made for the game. We watched an anime, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe. I'm not sure when it came out, well, a while ago, called Made in Abyss. Made in Abyss is a story about a girl that goes in search of her mother in a really big hole, essentially. And in that hole, weird stuff happens. There's weird creatures, things that don't make sense, but it's a very fantastical kind of world, right? And the whole feeling of Made in Abyss, I think, has sort of started to become a cornerstone of Maskborne, like the feel of Maskborne. That isolation, the loneliness, and all the stuff, all the weirdness that comes with stuff in Made in Abyss, like the creatures and where everything comes from. Big fans of that. And so we're trying to incorporate that element into the levels and the art that we're creating. The existing art that were in the previous devlogs, the gloomy cave stuff, was more like early test placeholder stuff. It still looks good, and we might still use parts of it, but it's not exactly where we wanted the game to head. So now we're focused on this spore mycelium inspired forest. Right, mycelium, I don't know if I've actually talked about this in terms of story or anything, but mycelium is a crucial part of the game. Right, spores and mycelium, they're really important. I don't want to get too much into it in terms of story, but they play a huge role. And so we had in the very early tests with the gloomy cave stuff, mycelium covered rocks and all that. And we probably still want to use some of that because they're still nice assets, right? But this bamboo-like spore forest, I think, sells the vibe of what we're going for a lot better. Not that every biome needs to look the same. It's not all going to look like this spore-infested bamboo forest, but I think it's a start, and it's a way for us to show you better kind of what we're thinking in terms of the style and the feel of the game. And to round off everything, I want to leave you with a little bit of info on the music of the game. And I feel incredibly lucky that we've arrived at where we have. We got contacted by a very talented Swedish musician, Johannes. He goes by Acmegon online, and he did the music for a puzzle platformer some years ago called Hoa. I believe they actually just announced a sequel to that, Hoa 2 as well. He watched one of the previous devlogs and got in touch, sent us over a few sketches that he had done, and I mean pretty much immediately we just kind of fell in love with the music and the feel of the music. He just captured the feeling of Maskborne right away, with inspirations of like Ghibli and Zelda, Ori, Samorost as well. This melancholy and loneliness with maybe a hint of exploration in there somewhere. It's the music that's been playing in this devlog and in the previous devlog as well. It's we have a lot of sketches already for a lot of incredible music, and I honestly can't wait for us to have more gameplay and more stuff in the game that we can send to Johannes, and then he can start, creating the soul of the game in the music for it. So far, I'm blown away by the music, and I hope you are too. And with all of that said, I think I'll wrap up this devlog number 3. I already have a ton of notes for devlog number 4, which is probably going to be more audio focused, pretty much exclusively, I think, because that was a big thing that I have already made now in the future, which will come out later. But anyway, thank you so much for watching this devlog. If you want to see more content like this, I would really appreciate your subscription. And if you want to talk about the game, or if you have questions about game dev in general, consider checking out our Discord or hit me up on X. I'm very active on both platforms. The Discord is constantly growing. There are new members all the time, and I feel like we have very good conversations in there. Not just about Maskborne, but about other games that people are working on as well. So if that's something for you, please check it out, and I will see you next time.